matin tout le monde. Bon matin aux députés ici en présentiel et bon matin aux témoins en présentiel et bon matin à tous nos députés et témoins qui se joignent à nous en Zoom. Aujourd'hui, on poursuit notre étude sur les facteurs qui ont mené aux récents incendies dans le parc national Jasper. Pour les témoins qui sont en ligne, si vous n'avez pas la parole, s'il vous plaît, mettez-vous en sourdine. Et pour les témoins ici en présentiel, s'il vous plaît, là, pour éviter des accidents. Okay, so that's yeah. Okay, so are we good? Est-ce que ça fonctionne maintenant ou non? Il y a personne dans la. Ah, les interprètes ne sont pas ici avec nous. Est-ce que vous m'entendez en anglais maintenant? Okay.
Voice.
Can people hear me in French? Can people hear me in French?
I don't know
No?
how it works.
I guess we're waiting to get connected in some way.
Well, it's he.
Alors, je vais continuer à... We're good? Vous m'entendez? M'entendez? No English translation. What about French translation? Is there French translation? No, there's no translation, period. Okay. So, pardon? No interpretation. There's no interpretation. There's no interpretation. Oh, you don't want to see that. No, you don't want to see interpretive dance. So. Ça fonctionne. Ça ne fonctionne pas encore. Là. Vous m'entendez pas en anglais si vous êtes sur le canal anglais, non? Non. OK. Well, we'll take a little pause, I guess.
Now, so it's 11 minutes past up, where we are to continue with our study on factors leading to the recent fires in Jasper National Park. And if you are online and you are not speaking, we ask you to please mute your microphone. And if you are here in the room, especially for the witnesses, I'm mainly mentioning this for the witnesses because we're all aware of that, the MPs. Be very careful when you speak, not to be too close to the microphone, and do not touch the stem of the microphone. And if you want to remove your earpiece, please put it down on the sticker on the table in front of you. This is in order to avoid any harm to the hearing of the interpreters, out of respect for them. So without further ado, for the first panel, we have Mr. Mike Flanagan, BC Innovation Research Chair, Predictive Services, Emergency Management and Fire Science, who is appearing by video on a personal basis. And we have Mr. Christian Messier, Professor of Forest Ecology on a personal basis. He's from the Arctic Fire Safety Services Limited.
Canadian Registered Safety Professional, Christopher Levam, and from the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, we have Elizabeth Potter, President, and Chief Executive Officer. Each witness will get 5 minutes for an opening statement. We'll start with Mr. Flanagan, who's online, I believe. Mr. Flanagan, go ahead. You have 5 minutes. Your mic seems to be on. There's no problem. Could you say a few words? Or? No, you can't hear me? Can you hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? No. Yeah, why don't we then go to Mr. Christian Messier, professeur d'écologie forestière.
Christian Messier, professor of forest ecology. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Well, good morning, Chair and committee members. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you today, and thank you for the invitation. So, the mega fire that we had in Jasper in 2024 was no accident, but rather the result of an accumulation of anthropomorphic factors, both internal and external to the park. It should be mentioned that in national parks, and in fact most forests near population centers, have been subject to constant human intervention over the past 100 years to extinguish fires that would normally have affected these forests. And the fact that the recurrence of these fires has prevented rejuvenation of the forest and the so-called pioneer species which grow well or reduce fire risk. The reason for these human interventions is simple. We wanted to preserve the magnificent natural landscapes and limit natural disturbances, but by doing this, we fostered an increase in the average age of trees, the presence of dead trees, and shade-tolerant conifers such as fir and spruce, which are often present in the undergrowth and which allow fires to climb to the canopy. These last three factors are well known to greatly increase the risk of fire, and it should be mentioned that since the climate is warming rapidly and Jasper is at a high latitude in the northern hemisphere where warming is increasingly present, the risks of having conditions conducive to megafires are of course increasing and are due to early springs that are hot and dry, the presence of fuel such as dead wood and softwoods that are easily inflammable, and also hot, dry summers with lots of thunderstorms as we're seeing more and more frequently. So what happened in Jasper was in fact foreseen by a number of researchers. There were a number of scientific articles mentioning that these types of fires were likely to occur, in fact caused by a gradual degradation of our forests and an increase in tree mortality. And this is something that happens not only in Canada, but everywhere in the world. Indeed, certain scientists predict that with the increase in climate change, fires are going to increase so much in the next 50 years that the forest is likely to emit as much carbon annually as the sum of all carbon emitted by human activities in Canada currently. So even if we were to stop producing carbon through human activity, the risk is that over the next 30 to 50 years, there would be as much carbon emitted through forest fires and mortality of our forests. So I understand that today's meeting aims to better understand the factors that led to the fires in Jasper National Park, but I would like to talk here more generally about the risk of major disturbances in our forests with global warming, and also the increased introduction of exotic insects and diseases. As you know, there are more and more species in our forests that are increasingly killing tree species, and as you know, with climate change, our trees are becoming more and more poorly adapted to climate conditions, resulting in a loss of thriving, which makes them more susceptible to insects and diseases that ought not to normally have affected them. Climate change is so rapid that many tree species find themselves, as we say, outside of their optimum climate zone, leading to a gradual loss of vigor and degradation of forests, which in turn increases the risk of fires, the carbon emitted by our forests, the precariousness of our forestry industry, the associated risks of biodiversity loss, and all the major services provided by forests. So over the past 10 odd years, Canadian forests have been emitting more carbon than it fixes, contributing to climate change or global warming. So what can we do? Here are some suggestions that I would like to share with you. We would have to foster diversification of tree species that have functional attributes that can respond to all types of disturbances, as is done, as you do in your pension fund investments to reduce risk and ensure an acceptable yield in the future. So diversification of trees in the same way would be important, and not systematically prevent small disturbances from occurring, such as small fires, and even provoke them by lighting controlled fires in order to reduce the amount of fuel and maintain the right amount of conifers and assess the vulnerability of our forests to insects and diseases and fires in all regions of Canada in order to use forest management to try to reduce those risks. And we also ought to accelerate the adaptation of our forests to climate change and insects by enhancing what we call assisted migration of tree species. In other words, an intervention by humans to bring species that are further south, further north. I'm sorry, we'll have to break you off there. You'll have an opportunity to add further comments when we reach the question period, the question and answer period.
Mr. Flanagan, can you hear me now? No. Okay, Mr. Leavam, I believe if you raise the mic, we might be able to hear you better. So why don't we try now for 5 minutes?
Right. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Just find the sound quality good enough, but we can hear you.
Right. Mr. Chairperson and committee members, statement I will provide a short example of how
Problem here, I think. Just a moment, please.
Welcome.
Could you bring the boom? I don't know. I can't see where the boom is. Yeah, that should be okay, actually. But shall we try again? Okay. Could you take it from the top, Mr. Leavam?
Mr. Chairperson and committee members, the statement that I provide today will provide a shocking example of how mismanaged the Jasper Fire was by Parks Canada and should warrant a deeper investigation into this agency's fire management and overall role as guardians of Canada's most important and cultural assets. On the evening of Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024, Arctic Fire Safety Services was contacted by the Alberta Emergency Management Agency to deploy 3 Type 3 fire engines and 11 firefighters to Jasper National Park. The request was later changed to 2 Type 3 engines to Jasper and 1 to another fire. The crews traveled up from Eckville through Highway 93 to Jasper, as well as some crews came in from Fort McMurray through Highway 16. We were informed that the crew were to bring tents and sleeping bags because there were no hotel rooms available in Jasper. The crew had to sleep on along the Jasper fire for 2 nights. On the night of July 24th, based on the verbal report of my crew, numerous issues occurred which affected the ability of firefighters to protect Jasper. There was a backburn which was underway by Parks Canada. The status of the backburn did not appear to be communicated to the structure protection specialist who was in Jasper from the ignition team with Parks Canada. All fire crews were sitting at the Jasper Fire Hall and were not at their pre-planned positions when the main fire entered Jasper because they believed the fire behavior observed was out of the backburn. It was not until reports of the building were on fire that fire crews deployed to save the town site. The scene was described as extremely chaotic.
Mr. Speaker.
Prior to the
Just could we stop here just for a second? Yes, Ms. Leah.
I'm actually having difficulty hearing him in English here.
Pardon me?
I'm having difficulty hearing this.
Yeah, me too.
witness.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay.
Est-ce que vous entendez mieux en...
Can you hear him better in French, Ms. Posey?
Oh, I'm just trying to listen without the headset on, and I'm not really.
Madame Posé, est-ce que vous entendez
Ms.
bien?
Posey, can you hear well at all through the interpreters? Were you hearing Mr. Livam well?
I don't understand French.
Madame Posé, est-ce que vous entendez
Ms.
bien?
Posey, were you able to hear him? Everything is fine there.
It seems to be in English that we have trouble here in the room understanding, but why don't you continue, Mr. Levam? Maybe speak
Chair?
a bit slower. Yes, Mr. Longfield.
Yeah, the English is the non-interpreted version is very tinny. And
Yes.
possibly if he spoke more slowly, it might be
Yes,
easier.
yes.
But it's very hard for me to
Yes,
pick it up
please,
as well.
Mr. Levam, please speak a bit more slowly, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Prior to the Parks fire, prior to the fire, Parks Canada ordered hydrants for Jasper with a different thread on the side ports than the thread used by all municipalities in Alberta and British Columbia. They only had 7 adapters which were available for hydrants to go from their thread to BAT. Our crews observed Petro Canada and mobile trailer park burned down and could not engage due to being able to connect to hydrants. Our crew were credited by a captain with the Jasper Fire Department for saving what's left of the downtown because they were at a hydrant that did have an adapter and were able to engage impingements on buildings. No secondary water sources were staged for when the hydrants would go down. The lesson learned from past WUI events is that it's normal practice to have water supply is pre-positioned. Once it was confirmed that Arctic Fire Safety Services were deploying additional fire crews on behalf of an insurance company and resort owner, our 2 engine crews were released from Parks Canada response with no explanation given. The structure protection specialist asked my crew lead, does Chris really have 20 fire trucks waiting in Hinton to come in? On the afternoon of July 24th, I was contacted by a company based in the United States called Red Zone. They undertake wildfire analytics and wildfire dispatching for insurance companies. They asked if I had resources which could go to Jasper for one of their clients. I let them know I had 3 Type 6 engines, 1 Type 7 engine, a tactical tender able to deploy. We were hired and tasked to protect Marmot Basin Ski Resort and the Jasper Tram. Shortly thereafter, I was contacted by their client Pursuit Collections, and I told them I was fully deployed and they asked if we could find resources to protect their properties. I reached out to my other firefighting contractors as well as through a Facebook page for oilfield firefighters. By that night, I was able to assemble a fleet of 20 fire trucks and 50 certified firefighters, all making their way to Hinton. I even declined additional resources from other companies as I felt we had enough to meet our response needs. These other companies included Safety First from Drayton Valley, Safety Boss from Edmonton, New Venture from Whitecourt, Superior Fire from Grand Prairie, and Elite Oilfield Services from Grand Prairie. On the morning of July 25th, most of our crews were assembled at the Hinton UFA card locks so we can convey into Jasper. All crews drove through the night to get to Hinton for the morning. At 9:11, we departed the Hinton UFA card lock and made our way to Jasper. We were with the understanding from Pursuit and Parks Canada liaison that we had permission to enter. We got to the first set of roadblocks west of Hinton and were denied entry at the order of Parks Canada Incident Command and were turned around. We attempted again to make entry to parks after we believe we had the issue figured out at 1542, but once again denied entry. My notes gone. At 1649, we were finally granted entry into Jasper Park. At 1855, we got into Jasper Fire and checked with the structure protection specialist. We split our teams to do a hasty check of properties that we were assigned to. We were not granted access to Marmot Basin, Jasper Tram, or Malign Lake Road. Of the properties we were able to assess, none received damage. Of the properties we could not assess, the backcountry kitchen was destroyed, approximate value of $12.5 million. We did not see any signs of active fire behavior at this time and returned back to Hinton. Our crews were exhausted from driving all night into Jasper. Our crews were morally deflated from not being able to help in time. Throughout the Jasper fire, we encountered numerous examples of Parks Canada fire management actively obstructing our activities and not providing us with relevant information on the fire. We were provided rules of engagement, which we had to accept or be escorted out by the wardens. They reiterated twice by Parks Canada Operations Section Chief, second in charge to the incident commander, that we are not legally allowed to be there. These orders or rules of engagement included not being part of the incident management organization. Wildfire defense systems from Montana, who were hired by other insurers, were allowed to be part of the incident management organization. During the impingement during these rules of engagement, we were also ordered to not fight fire. We were denied access to Marmot Basin and Jasper Tram until July 29th. It's clear that there's fire behavior still threatening those sites, and the delayed ability to access those locations put the economic viability of Jasper at risk. We are denied access to the Athabasca River, or to the hydrant system, or to the no surrender, or to the fire and flood water systems to get water for firefighting. We had to bring in 8 400-barrel tanks from Hinton, had to bring in numerous truckloads of water from Hinton. The approximate cost to our client was $60,000 just to bring in water to fight fire.
Sorry, we're Mr. Levin, we're really over time here, but there'll be opportunities to answer questions. Mr. Flanagan, can you hear me?
I can hear you when I turn.
Oh, perfect. Okay, we're in business. Okay, why don't you go ahead for 5 minutes, please?
Yeah, just a note, the interpretation in English does not work completely, and I have to turn it off. Okay. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me. My name is Mike Flanagan. I am the British Columbia Innovation Research Chair in Predictive Services, Emergency Management, and Fire Science. Yes, that's a mouthful. I am honored to be joining you today. I'm in Kamloops, British Columbia, the traditional and unceded territory of the Kamloops-Shishwampum people. I was saddened by the tragic Jasper fire, the loss of firefighter Morgan Kitchen, the loss of homes, businesses, and the emotional toll on people. Fire management is challenging, and it's becoming more challenging due to the increase in extreme fire weather and fire behavior. Extremes drive the fire world. In Canada, 3% of our forests, 3% of our fires burn, 97% of our area burn. And much of this happens on a relatively small number of days with extreme conditions, dry fuels, hot, dry, windy weather. A warmer world means more extreme fire weather and more extreme fires. What can we do to be better prepared for future fire seasons? First, Fire Smart should be mandatory in high-risk locations such as Jasper. Otherwise, that rain of embers that can travel kilometers will find homes and businesses to burn. We need structural protection, sprinklers in place. Enhanced early warning system. We know when extreme fire weather will occur, and we have a good idea when to expect new fires. We need to get more resources to those locations ahead of time, not after the fact. Even when conditions are extreme, aggressive initial attack while the fire is still small will be successful. One approach would be to develop a quick deploy national wildfire fighting force that would work hand in glove with existing fire management agencies. This could include a national firefighting air fleet, as well as ground fight crews. Instead of just copying what other countries are already doing in emergency management, we could be leaders by acting before the disaster strikes. Prevention and mitigation. Human-caused fires are preventable, and the number of human-caused fires have been decreasing due to things like fire bans and education. Managing the vegetation, the fuels, around communities can help reduce the likelihood of catastrophic fires. Wildfires and other potential disasters are multifaceted issues, and we need multi-pronged solutions. There is no quick fix. There are many challenges, but we should explore options to be better prepared to meet current and future fire seasons. We have the knowledge and expertise in Canada, and we have the knowledge and expertise to be world leaders in this field. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flanagan. And last but not least, Ms. Elizabeth Potter from the Tourism Industry of Canada.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Merci pour l'opportunité d'être ici aujourd'hui.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
I'm the President and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, representing tourism industries interests at the national level from coast to coast to coast. Today, I want to highlight the increasing risks wildfires pose to our industry and how we can work together to mitigate these risks. Every year, the threat of wildfires grows more acute, devastating communities across Canada, displacing residents, disrupting businesses, and discouraging visitors. This past summer in Jasper, we were reminded of how these events continue to threaten entire regions. For Canada's tourism industry, these events are more than just operational setbacks. They jeopardize livelihoods. Nature-based tourism, the core of many of our members' businesses, depend on the well-being of our landscapes. Wildfires don't just disrupt this, they put the very environments that draw visitors to Canada at risk. The reality is that incidents of extreme weather are occurring more frequently across Canada, and their economic and societal impacts are far-reaching. We must strengthen our collective response to this growing challenge by developing a national wildfire preparedness plan. This would ensure that multiple sectors, including tourism, are better equipped to protect Canadians from the environmental, health, and job security risks that come with these incidents. Wildfire management is a shared responsibility. The tourism sector is committed to working alongside government bodies at all levels, whether it's local communities or agencies like Parks Canada, to be better prepared for wildfire threats. Coordination between fire management agencies and tourism operators is crucial. Real-time information sharing, emergency planning, and public education will ensure that both visitors and operators are equipped to act under dire circumstances. This collaboration is already proving effective, and the tourism sector will continue to play its part. Looking forward, the creation of a national framework that provides support for individuals and businesses after extreme weather events will be a vital step. This would not only allow communities to recover more quickly, but also reduce mental health challenges and business losses. With suitable support, people are less likely to leave their communities in search of economic stability, allowing for a quicker and stronger recovery. We know that the increasing frequency and severity of wildfires are largely driven by climate change. That's why sustainable practices within our industry are so important. Parks Canada has highlighted how reintroducing fire to landscapes helps create healthier ecosystems. Similarly, the tourism industry is adopting strategies that reduce our environmental impact and contribute to the long-term resilience of the natural environments we rely on. In line with the investments made in wildfire management across the country, we can continue to strengthen our collective efforts. Initiatives like the National Fire Equipment Cache, which enhances our ability to respond to wildfire incidents, are essential. By continuing to invest in infrastructure, training, and public-private partnerships, we can ensure that communities and businesses have the tools they need to respond effectively to wildfires. In closing, we have a real opportunity to strengthen our approach to wildfire management. It requires the collaboration of government, communities, fire agencies, and industries like ours. By working together to build a national framework, commit to readiness, and support effective communities, we can enhance public safety, preserve Canada's natural beauty, and ensure that tourism remains a thriving part of our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Potter. We'll go to questions now. Mr. Calkins for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I'm just going to check. Mr. Leavam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, thank you for your testimony here. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the committee business that's been happening, but the last committee meeting we had, the Minister of Emergency Preparedness say to this committee that he left no stone unturned in order to do everything he could to prevent the loss of property in Jasper National Park. Would you agree with that sentence?
I would not.
Okay, the testimony that you've given before this committee today is actually quite alarming. So can you just confirm to me that in a short amount of time, you were able to muster 20 fire trucks and 50 professional firefighters? And could you tell me what the qualifications of those firefighters would be? Were they fire-tested firefighters?
Yes. So I did have 20 fire trucks and 50 firefighters. Majority of the firefighters I had were NFPA 10001, 10002, as well as numerous firefighters that were wildland firefighters, either wildland firefighter type 1 or wildland firefighter type 2.
So could you explain to the committee what that level of certification actually means? That's some fairly technical language. These are fully certified firefighters? These are, and you said each of them had credentials and have experience fighting fires before?
That's correct. So the NFPA qualifications are the same as any municipal firefighter. So similar to Calgary or Edmonton or any fire hall, majority of fire halls in Alberta do subscribe to the NFPA standard. So the volunteer firefighters are trained to the same standard as a big city fire department. The wildland firefighters are the same firefighters that qualifications that are recognized through CIFC. So the type 1 firefighter would be the government agency firefighter. The type 2 firefighter would be the contract firefighter.
Okay. In your testimony, you said that the hydrants in Jasper National Park are not the same as the hydrants that are used virtually everywhere else in British Columbia and Alberta. Did I hear that correctly?
That is correct.
So you also said there's only 7 adapters available. So I'm guessing when you say this, what you're meaning is the adapter that you would need to plug in to the hydrants in Jasper. There was only 7 of these adapters, so that I'm guessing the Jasper fire trucks, like the ones that are there all the time, are probably able to tie in. My experience from being a warden in Jasper, there's only a couple of fire trucks in town. I'm not belittling their fire service. I think it's a great volunteer fire service like everywhere else. But anybody else coming to the community to help would be virtually, they have 7 adapters. So basically 7 rigs could tie in. Is that right?
Aside from their mutual aid partners that they rely on, such as Hinton and Clearwater County, any other fire trucks coming at us that do not have a normal working relationship with the Parks Canada communities would not have these adapters on board. This is not part of common kit.
Okay, so that's certainly a factor that isn't helpful. But you were able to muster enough vehicles to provide water yourself as a contingency. You don't necessarily rely on being able to tie into a hydrant. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's been my experience from previous fires that the hydrant systems cannot be deemed as reliable because they're only designed to have 1 or 2 structure fires at a time. So when you have numerous fire trucks tying in, it is not impossible for the water system to be completely depleted. So that's why we now use secondary water sources to supply water.
And you had the fire trucks and the water trucks available in order to engage the fire in Jasper in the town site, correct?
That's correct.
And you were told specifically that you could not access, and you were told specifically by parks officials to not engage in fighting the fire in Jasper. Did I hear you say that correctly?
We were able to use water from Pyramid Lake, but not from Athabasca River, and we were not allowed to engage the fire.
20 fire trucks, 50 firefighters, not allowed to engage the fire. Is there anything in the statutes that you're aware of that would have allowed them to actually bring you under their incident command protocols and actually had you join the fight against the fire?
So in previous experience, what they could have done was assign a task force leader to our group to act as a liaison to the incident command. So this way we could have a functioning relationship with the incident command. As well, in dire circumstances, if the fire came in and they're worried about the entire community, they do have the ability under various legislation, such as the Alberta Forest and Prairie Protection Act, to use conscription to bring us into their command as well.
Do you believe that if you would have been able to engage the fire, that you could have saved some property in Jasper town site?
Absolutely. Part of our arsenal that we had out there were 2 airport fire trucks as well as 8 industrial fire trucks. So these are monstrously large fire trucks that could have put out a lot of water to help protect communities on the front line. Then the smaller brush trucks could have been used to help defend the community from the impingements that landed.
What did it make you and your crews that you had assembled feel like when you were told not to engage in the fires and you stood and watched properties burn down in Jasper?
Briefly, please, Mr. Lieberman.
We were deflated. We felt that our mission, we could have done more to help.
Thank you. Mr. Longfield.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses, and thank you to our tech crews that keep these committees going with the support that you provide our witnesses and us as parliamentarians. I want to start with Mr. Levan, just to, expand on your involvement that night. Were you on the ground that night when things were all happening?
My intent was to be there that night, but when I had my crews got split up, I had to send my senior firefighters with me. One who was a former deputy fire
Okay.
chief for the Enoch Cree
Okay.
Nation.
Okay, so you're passing on information, and part of the information that you're passing on isn't connecting with some of our information that we have from the night of the fire that was happening on the ground. So I know there will be other hearings. There will that hearings have been scheduled. This committee is looking at some of the governance issues and what we could do as members of parliament to support future firefighting efforts. The role of the unified command and the governance around that. I asked a question on a previous.
Excuse me, I have to interrupt for a second. Mr. Leavam, your sound is not sufficiently of sufficient quality for the interpreters. So, Mr. Longfield, I'm sorry to interrupt your question, but you'll have to direct it to someone else, I think.
Okay, actually, if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll ask the question and ask for an answer in
written
writing.
Response, yeah, okay.
I'll go to another witness after that.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
My question is in terms of coordination of efforts that Unified Command really is the ones that are the command and control on the disaster as it's unfolding. We did bring in firefighters from other countries following a governance through Unified Command. My question is how this group was brought into the fire. I understand there was an insurance company involved from the States. How did we tie into Unified Command? Who asked them to be there? And how did that then unfold in terms of governance? But I'll go over to, and so thank you for the answer, and thank you for the role that you played in saving some property. Obviously, I think there's some coordination between your group and the Unified Command structure that needs some further work. I'd like to take my question over to, sorry, I have to click to a different screen here, over to Mr. Messier. You mentioned the pine beetle. I was involved with the forestry industry supplying hydraulic equipment back in the 2000s, 2004. That outbreak happened and really was fought for years, actually more than a decade, to try and get pine beetles under control. One of the theories at the time was that the pine beetle survived winters that used to be a lot more harsh before climate change, changed weather patterns. Is that how maybe directly or indirectly climate change is affecting forests by having different types of species attack trees just by their nature of living and what they do to survive? They take the life of the tree. Could you maybe comment on the role of climate change on the invasive species that are then affecting our forests?
Yes, in the case that you bring forward, actually, there was two causes for this increase of pine beetles. It was the fact that we plant a lot of pine, lodgepole pine in British Columbia and in Alberta through forestry, and I think we have created large monocultures that were actually much more susceptible to the pine beetle. But you're right that the scientists have shown that when we get temperature in the winter below -30, usually it kills the beetles or reduces the beetles, and with climate change, it's getting warmer. And so there was two factors, as you see, survival of the beetles during the winter and the fact that there was a lot more pure lodgepole pines across BC that has created this epidemic. Actually, this is a native species that was native in BC, not to Alberta, that has crossed the prairies because of this very large amounts, and is actually spreading toward the east and threatening all the pines in Canada. And this is one example of many other insects, and that was my statement today, that we should not be worried only about fires. We should be worried about drought, about various type of insects that may not have been doing a lot of damage before, but will do more damage because the trees are getting weaker, maladapted. And I think we need to look at the question in a very broad way and not just looking one disturbance or one factor at a time.
Right. And I think, the danger within this committee is that we are focused on Jasper as part of our study, and we do have legislation that's gone through the House on the Jasper situation. The broader picture of healthy forests and healthy biosystems becomes the bigger picture, and climate change is part of that. As you said, biodiversity is another big part of that, and that the national government could have a role to play. Am I understanding that properly in terms of rolling out better ecosystems for the forestry industry?
Yeah, that's actually what I think we should do. Is we should use forestry as a tool to help diversify and adapt our forests to climate change and other disturbances. Actually, I just got a big grant from NSERC and a lot of partners in Canadian provinces to test this across Canada. So the idea will be to use forestry not just to simplify the forest and produce only a few species that are useful for the industry, but really to make the forest better adapted, more diversified. And I think if we do this, we will be able maybe to reduce the risk of having wildfires like in Jasper. And I will just finish by saying that it should also be done in parks, not just in forests that we cut, because in parks, even there, the species are maladapted to what's happening and the risk of dying and burning is increasing.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Chair.
Madame Posey.
On a perdu l'habitude d'être
We've
sur.
lost the habit of being on Zoom. So thank you so much to all of our witnesses for being present this morning. Mr. Massier, your testimony has proven to us how great these problems are. You've talked about insects and fires and diseases. So the problem isn't just in Jasper, but it's actually everywhere. And you've expressed this quite well. It's all over the world as well. So this is certainly not very joyful what you've communicated to us, but it is real. So remember the fires that happened in Quebec in 2023. We know that the smoke went all the way to New York and to all of the American Northwest. Mr. Flanagan also talked about this embers, rain of embers, which can also cause fires. So there must be a way of improving things. But would a better integration or a better analysis of federal and provincial data and on environmental surveillance, would that be necessary according to you? Well, I would say that the provinces and the federal government actually work very well together. I'm speaking as a research, and when it comes to sharing data, I talked to you about the project that I call Diverse, which we've just started, and we're working with different researchers federally and provincially, and we're trying to get all of that data together. And we'll be able to better evaluate the vulnerability of our forests and what we can do about things when we better manage them to reduce risks, not just for fires. I do stress this, but also the mortality that might be caused to the trees because of droughts, insects, and winds, etc. So I think that the collaboration is good. Of course, it could always be improved, but it is good. And when it comes to research, at any rate, it's really good. A while ago, you've also talked about this worldwide problem. Could other things be happening somewhere else also be that things that are carried out in other places? Could that also help to the management of our forests and as well as the management of emergencies? Well, I would say that one of the things that is positive about international research is that we are working together, and research is always public. It's inside of journals. We have a lot of collaborative projects. My project called Diverse, I'm working with American researchers and almost in every country of the world, and we share all of our information and our experiences in order to try and approach things the best way for all concerned. So this type of collaboration is being done on a very large scale. And I'd say that Canada is definitely a leader in this area, internationally speaking. So we're talking about climate change, we're talking about mitigation and adaptation, but we can see that with the acceleration of climate change and the temperatures, we should also accelerate our adaptation. So speaking of this, what can a government do or should it do in order to plan and the allocation of resources when there are many catastrophes that can happen, because this is what we're facing? Is there anything in particular that a government can do, any government, in order to help to plan the allocation of resources? That's an excellent question. It's a little bit outside of my purview, though. I think that what we need to do is to try and get out of our comfort zones, always of doing things up until now. We've always considered that a forest was a stable thing. It didn't change. It was always constant, and that we could easily predict what was going to happen over the next 150 years. And that's no longer the case. Changes are happening quickly. The level of uncertainty is going up quickly. And so we're going to need completely different approaches. It means that we're going to have to change rules and laws. You know that in all provinces and territories, we have many rules that demand that we keep planting over and over the same species. And that means that we're going to keep our ill-adapted forests the same in the future. And I think that we should change those rules because we need to facilitate the adaptation of new species. And we need to create a lot more diversity in the types of forests, not just in the landscape, in the forest, etc. We want to reduce and mitigate insect infestations. So many things, many approaches have to be taken into account. When I present, I always say that we basically have to change absolutely entirely the way we manage forests. What is good, though, is that the forestry sector could be used to do this. Yes, I have to stop you this. Yes, we need to foster the diversification. I only have 30 seconds left. So what about forests? The minister has said that there were certain zones that could help us to mitigate fire. What do we need to have these buffer zones? Well, we suggest to have leafy tree forests around this. We could take them away, but it would create deserts. So we want more deciduous. We're talking about birches, poplars, and boreal forests, and they really reduce the risks of fire. And it has an important effect on reducing those fires, and that could work in all forests. Thank you, Madam Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here. My first question is for Mr. Flanagan. We've seen that climate change is making our wildfire seasons more intense, longer. They're having a devastating impact on communities. And dealing with wildfires in the past has primarily been left up to the provinces and territories, with then some support from the military. Earlier this year, the Chief of Defense talked about how they won't be able to fill the gaps given the increasing need from wildfires. And so you had mentioned a national firefighting service. This is something that my New Democrat colleagues and I have been pushing for. Can you talk a little bit about the need for a national firefighting service and what that would mean when it comes to fighting wildfires in Canada?
Sure. The United States has something called FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. We have nothing like that in Canada. So fire management is the responsibility of the landowners. So provinces, territories, Parks Canada, and Department of National Defense does a little bit as well. And they help each other out. It's a brotherhood. But sometimes you get overwhelmed and you need extra resources. So what I'm suggesting is that a national agency to work in hand in glove, a unified command system with Parks Canada, BC, Alberta, whoever, when before emergencies arrive. We have the capabilities to know when extreme fire weather is coming, and extremes really do drive the fire world. Simply there's three ingredients for a wildfire: the vegetation, the fuel, ignitions, and the weather. I'm biased, but I think weather is the key driver, and we're seeing more extreme fire weather, and we're seeing more extreme fires. And we're going to continue to see that. And, $7 billion was spent on disasters this summer in Canada alone from the Insurance Bureau of Canada. And that's only increasing. And so we need to deal with this. And
Mr. Flanagan, just sorry to interrupt. I just overheard one of my conservative colleagues when you had talked about weather say it's the one you can't do anything about, so focus on the others. Now, this is something we've heard when it comes to combating climate change, that somehow we need to throw up our hands. Can you speak a little bit about how climate change is an existential crisis and that we need to be doing everything that we can to combat the climate urgency?
So in Canada, our area burn has quadrupled since the 1970s, and my colleagues attribute this to human-caused climate change. I mean, it's not just fire, it's flooding, sea level rise. We are changing the climate because of our human activities, primarily greenhouse gases. And until we do something, as a society, a global society, people, communities, state, provinces, territories, we have to solve this problem. And, the scary thing is, even if we stop producing greenhouse gases today, we're going to continue to warm for 20, 30 years. And a warmer world means more disasters. And that's...
Thank you so much. I do want to ask Ms. Potter, you had talked about the need for a national kind of wildfire preparedness plan. We know that Canadians expect their government to protect them from wildfires. Businesses expect the government to protect the economy for the impacts. Can you talk a little bit about what is needed when it comes to a national wildfire preparedness plan?
Thank you for the question. I think that, coordination of effort is something that we are looking for here. I know that from an industry perspective, we are doing that ourselves. We wanted to make sure, especially following, 2022 and 2023, where we saw, devastation and mass evacuation. We wanted to make sure from the tourism perspective that, while residents and employees were looked after, we wanted to make sure the visitor was looked after as well. So we came together as an industry to create our own national plans, and I think that needs to happen as well.
And it's surprising that even after the 2023 devastating, record-breaking wildfire season, that this government hasn't actually created a national wildfire preparedness plan that is adequate to protect our communities, protect our economy, they haven't filled the gaps that are going to be left by the military not having the capacity to respond to these fires. Maybe over to you, Mr. Messier. You talked a little about the need to change our forestry management practices. This seems like another gap that has been overlooked, given the year after year we're seeing the increases. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I wrote in a newspaper that we need a Marshall Plan in the same kind of level of effort that we've done after the Second World War to transform Europe. We need a Marshall Plan in terms of how we manage our forests, not just in Canada, in the world, because lots of scientists are showing tree mortality is increasing in all our forests. Forests are dying. I was in Germany 3 years ago when there was a drought. There was not one drop of rain for 5 months. And now more than 40% of the forest is dying. We will have droughts in our forests more and more. We have more and more insects and disease coming from all over the world. So I think we need really a big effort. And this is what I'm advocating here is we will have more fires, but we'll have more drought, we'll have more mortality, more insects.
Thank you.
And it's all of this that we need to...
Thanks very much. We'll go to the second round, which will be reduced to 4 minutes and 2 minutes. Mr. Soroka.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start off with Mr. Leavam. You had said that you were not legally allowed to be there. Could you explain why you were not?
That's what was explained to us by the operations section chief, the second in command to the incident commander. As far as I know, we were allowed to be there because this was through the Parks Canada liaison person and our client that made these arrangements for us to be in there. I I guess there's no legislative process to allow contract firefighters being there on behalf of other parties. Must be the reasoning for that. But we did not show up there unanticipated. This was arrangements that were made on behalf of our client Pursuit and Parks Canada before we showed up. It's not like we showed up at the door and managed to be let in like barbarians. It was our expectation that when we got to the gate that we were supposed to be permitted to go in to do our job to help protect the economic engine of Jasper.
Okay, and Mr. Leavam, one of the concerns was when the houses were burning and that they were releasing toxic fumes. Did you have the proper self-contained breathing apparatus to deal with a fire like that?
Self-contained breathing apparatus in WUI events are pretty much ineffective. You've only got about 30 minutes of air, and these trucks don't carry enough air on them to manage this kind of workload. My recommendation for all fire departments would be to get powered air respirator units that are full face respirator that have a battery powered assist on it, but I don't believe any fire departments had any of that equipment on them. We did have respirators on our trucks that had the P100 filters for our crew to use, and that's what the majority of the fire departments were using for that event.
So were you able to or qualified to do structural fires or not?
Yes. The crew that we had in there were all NFPA 1001 firefighters. The majority of them are part of active volunteer fire departments. So yes, the crew that I had in Jasper that night were all qualified 1001 firefighters.
So you were all qualified, but yet you were asked to leave and not assist with any structural fires then?
Yes.
Wow. And you don't have any reason as to why they would have done this for, do you?
The only reason I could think of is because we were coming in with another party that they didn't want to have, I don't know, leakage or I really have no idea. They never explained that to me. They just released my 2 engines as other fire trucks were coming in. So I took those 2 engine crews and I put them on with my private response for the insurance company.
So they didn't say anything about that you didn't have the capabilities to tie into the hydrants or the proper fittings or anything that way. There was no reason other than just please leave.
That's right.
Wow. That's quite interesting. I don't know how to follow up on that questioning, to be honest with you. Maybe I'll go over to Monsieur Messier then. You spoke about how man intervenes with fires or forest by putting out forest fires. Is it something that we need to start controlling or managing our forests a lot better to clear out the deadfall, make sure that we can protect communities, not just within fire smarting, we're talking within the close proximity, but a mile or 2 miles or 3 or 4 kilometers away to manage the forest a lot better?
Très rapidement, s'il vous plaît, professeur Messier, comme dans 20 secondes.
Yes, very quickly. 20 seconds, yes.
Maybe talk to the First Nations. They've used wildfires for a long time. They know how to do it. And I think it could have a big impact around communities.
Merci. Madame Châtel.
Madame Chappelle, 4 minutes. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witnesses. Mr. Messier, you know Canadian forests extremely well, including those in the Ottawa region, including my riding of Pontiac, Zidigan-Zibi. So thank you for being here. You have spoken often of what you call resilient forestry. As we know, forests in the Pontiac area is actually right now threatened by insects and various diseases that have come from climate change. You have had solutions presented, and you've got a lot of experience, and I am very interested in understanding these things. I have 2 questions for you. Could you first of all explain to us concretely how the resilience approach can be used nationally as well as locally, and how can it reinforce our capacity to face climate change? And my second question is the role of both governments, federal and provincial. What can they do? what can they do to support this transition towards a more resilient management of our forests? How many hours do I have exactly to talk to you? 2.5 minutes. Well, I'll do our best. I've talked to you about my project called Diverse, which is national, goes from BC to Nova Scotia. And what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be working closely with all players and all governments, with the industry and NGOs and everything else, in order to see how we can increase management, and because we don't want to be losing large parcels of forest. And we want to see what kind of management, because we're going to be thinking completely new way of doing things, new species that are better adapted to climate change. And I'd say, in brief, is that science is clear. Sorry. We know that we have uncertainty, and to increase diversity is the best approach. It's the best possible thing that we can do, because it will have a huge impact. I think that we can do this, and forest cutting can also be, forestry can be used to help. We know that provinces, of course, are the ones in charge of forest management. So those decisions are made by the provinces. So we'll be talking to each one of the provinces and looking at what sort of regulations or laws can be changed. The good news is that most provinces are very interested, and all of the big forest industries in Canada and environmental groups are as well. So I think that altogether we can develop a world-class project to help our forests. And like you have said, this type of management, this resilience approach is definitely going to save our villages, save our towns and cities. This is the potential that this project has. And this can be, yes, of course. So it can help all of our industries, our leisure, recreation, anything we can do to help these natural environments that helps us, and in fact that we depend on. So you're entirely right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madame Chatel. So, Madame Posé, you have 2 minutes. Yes, thank you so much. I just want to get back to you, Mr. Messier. You've talked about diversity of species in fragile zones or sensitive zones, and you've talked about leafy trees. Is a city considered as an example of what you'd call a fragile area? Is that what you mean exactly? Well, cities are fragile zones because there are structures that need to be protected, lives that need to be protected. So it's very important to act in cities first, and to do what has to be done around the cities in order to attempt to diversify the forest and to make it more resilient to fires and insect infestation. So that's certainly what we could do as a priority over the next few years. Now, you have also said that certain rules and laws need to be changed because you have to plant, for instance, the same species over and over again. Is anyone listening in the government level? Well, honestly, I'd say to you that the forest industry is much more interested in hearing what I have to say compared to governments. And honestly, I really don't understand why. The governments seem to want to keep their ways of doing things. And in 30 seconds, I'll try to explain. Most provinces demand that we have the same mix of forest and trees for the next 150 years, which is absolutely nonsensical because of the climate changes. And those conditions are going to change so much, and we need to let the forest adapt and change. So when people say to me, what should we change for rules? That is the first one that we need to be changed. I really hope, but I feel lots of resistance. Madame Posé, you have 15 seconds. So 15 seconds to ask Mr. Messier if he has a study. Do you have a study or any kind of document that you could give to the committee so that we could exert pressure and lobby as well? Yes, duly noted. Madam Collins, 2 minutes.
Mr. Flanagan, you've talked in your research about how fire management policies and effectiveness will continue to change. Can you talk a little bit about what the government needs to do, what actions need to be taken in order to prevent wildfires in the future?
Sorry, was the question addressed to me? I'm still having trouble with the
Yes, sorry, Mr. Flanagan, that was addressed to you.
So, as a quick aside, there needs to be an independent, fulsome review of the Jasper fire. I mean, in large part, what happened was a result of a pyrocumulonimbus, a fire-generated thunderstorm. This is the most intense display of Mother Nature's energy in terms of the fire world. And that, in large part, was the reason that we lost a third of the town. What can we do? There's, as mentioned, Fire Smart. Jasper is the confluence of three valleys, high-risk location. Valleys act as corridors, wicks, pathways, and they knew it was a high-risk location, and they had been doing a lot of work. But those embers that travel kilometers, the West Kelowna fire jumped Lake Okanagan in 2023. So three ingredients: vegetation, ignition, weather. Let's say we can't do anything about climate change and extreme weather. Okay, fine. We can't do anything about lightning, weather ignitions. People cause fires. We can and are doing things. And then the last thing is the vegetation. Managing vegetation in high-risk areas, around high-risk communities, that will help reduce the likelihood of extreme fire and catastrophic fire, but will never eliminate it. As long as there's stuff to burn, when things are extreme, even if they are leafy, like aspen, Fort McMurray is surrounded by aspen, and we saw what happened there. When things are extreme, fuel is fuel is fuel, unfortunately, and it burns. And it can burn at fairly high intensity, even if it's not a conifer.
Thank you. Mr. Leslie for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will start with you, Mr. Levin. You mentioned in your opening remarks that Parks Canada...
Sorry, is that directed at Mr. Willem?
Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, the interpreters can't interpret him. So you could still ask him to submit something in writing if you wish, or make a statement, but we
can't let him try to...
No. Well, no, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Okay, I will ask Mr. Livum to answer in writing if he is possible. You said in your opening remarks that Parks Canada ordered hydrants for Jasper Park that were different than all of the rest in BC and Alberta, and then only 7 adapters that could be used on a moment's notice. Now, this is shocking evidence that Parks Canada officials certainly didn't say last week, and the Minister Guilbeault and Minister Sagen certainly made no mention of. What was the impact of that failure to order aligned fittings for hydrants? So if you could provide that in writing to this committee. You also mentioned that you were threatened and with arrest or removal on multiple times. So if you could further identify what those instances were, and if you know what officials with Parks Canada were deciding to intentionally turn away 20 trucks and over 50 firefighters, well-trained firefighters, and not only just turning them away with the apparent threat of force. If you could provide a little bit more detail to the committee on that. And lastly, as an expert that works regularly in the field on the ground, if you could provide a little bit of context as to whether or not, in your view, prescribed burns and mechanical removal are effective tools to mitigate the potential heat sources and damage caused by wildfires, particularly the one in Jasper, and in your expert opinion, whether or not enough of that was done by Parks Canada to prevent that from happening. And lastly, in your view, if Parks Canada was in fact negligent in its responsibilities that led to the disastrous fire in Jasper. So if you could all do that, I would appreciate that. I'll move back to Mr. Messier. You mentioned an increase in pests. What is the transmission of pests to our forests? Like, how does that happening?
Yeah, I was part of a committee, a national committee that, and I can send you the report, but we are doing a lot of trade with Europe, the US, and the Asian and China. And interestingly enough, they have the same kind of climate, the same type of trees, and the risk of bringing an insect and a pest from these areas is very high. And actually, we are doing that almost every day. So that's actually one of the clear problems is we are trading with regions of the world that have similar species, and the risk of bringing a species where the trees in this original country, they have adapted to it, but here they are not adapted to it. And this is what's happening, and it's increasing.
Thank you, Mr. Messier. I just want to give the rest of my time to Mr. Deltel.
Perfect.
45 seconds, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Messier. Yes, go ahead. Mr. Messier, thank you very much for your approach, which I find very practical. Your vision is very tangible and concrete and impressive. Like you have heard the firefighters' testimony, and I can see how attentive you were. Could you tell us what you feel about it? 30 seconds. Well, it's really not in my purview. I was very surprised to hear that all of the resources weren't there to fight fires. And I imagine that there must be certain structural problems with regards to management and with all the different organizations, but I can't really pronounce myself more than that. But like us, you must have been shocked and outraged to hear that there are firefighters who are there willing to fight. Yes. Well, we've got over 4 minutes. Maiden Taylor-Royce, it's your turn now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. I realize that Mr. Levin can't respond, but just for the record, I was hoping that you could verify for us that your company is a for-profit company, it's not volunteer, and that you were on the ground hired by insurance companies or contractors. I'd also like to understand, you mentioned that you don't understand why private or independent firefighters are not allowed to come in and fight the fires, why there's legislation preventing that. Do you really believe that allowing independent firefighters who may be hired by multiple different sources to be coming in and doing what they want to do in the area when there's a major firefighter like this going on would actually be safe and would lead to a coordinated effort? So perhaps you could answer those questions for me in writing. And then the other question I have is for Mr. Messier and for Mr. Flanagan. We have two different conversations going on. One is really about what exactly happened in Jasper, and I believe that the firefighters did an amazing job. They collaborated. We've had plenty of witnesses from all parties. And what was done beforehand to prepare for this fire. Mr. Flanagan, I believe you said fire smarting was important to do, the burns, mechanical clearing, et cetera. And you said that you felt that they had done a good job. Now, understand they could do more given the conditions now. I'm just wondering, there's also been a notion introduced that because forest fires are still happening, that somehow our efforts to reduce emissions have failed. That because even though we've bent the curve on bringing emissions down, forest fires are still happening, so it's not worth it. I was just wondering if you could comment on that in the larger picture when you're talking about what's happening to our forests and whether or not that's a fair assessment.
You want me to start, or Mr. Flanagan,
Sure, Mr. Flanagan, I think you've had fewer questions.
That I know very well, so I am using this. Yeah.
Very good, Mr. Flanagan.
So, yes, emissions due to forest fires were 647 teragrams approximately in a new study, which is about the size of India's fossil fuel emissions. So our forests have become carbon sources due to fire and insects. And I don't see that changing in the short term as we continue with climate change. However, the international agreement on reporting of emissions is for the managed forest for fire. So that greatly reduces the international reporting. But to be honest, the atmosphere doesn't care if the fire is burning in a managed forest or unmanaged forest. It's still emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Absolutely. So given forest fires are still happening, do you believe that a price on pollution program is necessary, that it can be working to reduce emissions and that forest fires could still be happening? Is that possible?
It's challenging because we try and manage fires, and to be honest, we're not doing a great job. You just have to look at all the disasters we've seen the last few years, whether it's Nova Scotia or BC or Alberta. It's going to continue. I mean, the scary part is that our peatlands are vast legacy carbon that's been storing since the last ice age. So a fire can go through and emit enormous amounts of greenhouse gases, and they're becoming more vulnerable as these peatlands thaw, the permafrost thaws, and they become available to burn.
Thank you. Well, that's all the time we have for this first panel, which was extremely interesting. I want to thank the panelists for making themselves available. We'll have a quick break to onboard our next panel and continue for another hour. Thank you very much. Thank you again. We have with us as testifying as an individual, Lori Daniels, Corner Chair, Wildlife Coexistence Forestry and Forestry, University of British Columbia. From the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees, we have James Galt, Vice President, Northeast Region. From the Forest Products Association of Canada, we have Kate Lindsay, Senior Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer. And we have from the Government of Alberta, Minister Mike Ellis, Deputy Premier and Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, and Minister Todd Loewen, Minister of Forestry and Parks. We'll start with you, Ms. Daniels, for 5 minutes. The floor is, or the screen is yours, I should say.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. My name is Dr. Lori Daniels. I'm a professor of forest ecology and the Kerner Chair of Wildfire Coexistence at the University of British Columbia. I'm coming to you today from the ancestral territory of the Musqueam First Nation. I have studied historical fire regimes and their impacts on forest dynamics in Western Canada for the past 20 years. Thank you for the opportunity to share insights from the research that we have conducted, both on the factors that contributed to the Jasper wildfires, but also the urgently needed strategies in order to make our ecosystems and communities more resilient to future fires and climate change. I have 3 core messages for you today. First, the Jasper Wildfire Complex was a century in the making. Our research shows that the historical fire regime in Jasper began to change in the early 1900s. Over several centuries, from the 1600s to 1800s, low severity fires burned somewhere in the Athabasca Valley once every 20 years on average, scarring trees but not killing them. Patches of high severity fire would kill trees and provide openings where grasses, shrubs, broadleaf and needleleaf trees regenerated. Landscape photos from the early 1900s show a diverse mosaic of ecosystems. Now, the fire scars stopped in 1915. This is the beginning of the fire suppression era, where Indigenous people were removed from their land and their good fire stewardship was terminated. Ignitions by lightning and people were suppressed to protect the forest. The paradox is that this good intention has had unintended consequences. Without repeat, low-impact fires, the forest simultaneously matured, creating a uniform landscape of continuous needleleaf forests with abundant flammable fuels, strongly contrasting historical landscapes and fire regimes. These mature forests were also optimal habitat for mountain pine beetle, which spread into Jasper. The beetle is native to Western North America, but it is novel to forests east of the Continental Divide. Its eastward expansion was facilitated by climate change, and the beetles have caused high tree death rates in Alberta. Field surveys and experiments conducted with Parks Canada have shown that abundant lodgepole pine trees, dead lodgepole pine trees and logs contribute to rapid rates of fire spread, fire intensity, and emit large amounts of heat, smoke, and carbon. And so the stage was set after 100 years for the fire this summer. My second message to you is that Jasper is not an anomaly. Disruption of Indigenous fire stewardship, fire suppression, and widespread forest health problems have cumulative effects across the forests in Canada. Climate change is now superimposed on vulnerable landscapes and amplify the effects. Mountain pine beetle impacted 19 million hectares of forests in Western Canada. Fires burned 15 million hectares across our country in 2023 alone. My third and final point then is that transformative changes are urgently needed. We need to diversify our approaches and amplify the pace and scale of our response to recent wildfire extremes and climate change. We also need to recognize that specific strategies are as complex as the diverse ecosystems and forests across Canada. Pro-action requires support from all levels of government, including the federal government. Example strategies include, but are not limited to, investing in equal amounts in emergency response to wildfires, but also the proactive management to mitigate future wildfire effects through mechanical treatments, prescribed and cultural burns. This is an underfunded and underutilized approach, which is costing Canadians billions of dollars due to the direct and indirect effects of wildfires. Secondly, we can invest in fire smart programs at home and community levels to expand education and actions to improve resiliency. We need to support Indigenous-led programs given that fires are disproportionately affecting Indigenous peoples, communities, and territories. We need to implement landscape fire management to reduce negative consequences of catastrophic fires and improve ecosystem resilience and sustain a forestry sector. We need to support the bioeconomy and bioenergy to overcome economic barriers and invest in post-secondary training to build much needed capacity in pyrosilviculture, prescribed and cultural fire. These transformative actions are urgently needed to mitigate climate change, adapt our forest management, and proactively prepare for wildfire impacts on Canadian ecosystems and communities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniels. We'll go to Mr. Galt.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address this committee today on the matter that has impacted Albertans and people around the world, the wildfire in Jasper. My name is James Galt, and I'm one of 6 vice presidents of Alberta Union of Provincial Employees. I represent the Northeast region. That region includes Lamont, Slave Lake, Fort McMurray, and Lloydminster, and everything in between. I also work closely with Local 5, which is the Alberta National Resources and Conservation Officers. Alberta's wildland firefighters and conservation officers, many of whom are part of Local 5, were essential in the battle against the Jasper wildfire. They were joined by colleagues from across Canada and countries like Costa Rica, Australia, South Africa, and Mexico, and the Canadian Armed Forces also provided support. These brave men and women risked their lives to contain the fire, and their commitment is beyond question. Yet while their efforts were heroic, the reality is that they have been operating within a system that has failed them, not through lack of dedication, but because of poor policy decisions that have reduced the resources that they need. These brave men and women risked their lives to contain the fire, and their commitment is beyond question. Wildfire management in Alberta requires a collaboration between provincial, municipal, and federal authorities. However, this system only works when all levels of government provide the necessary resources. Sadly, this has not been the case. The strain is not due to the efforts of our firefighters and support staff, but due to the lack of investment in their work in the province of Alberta. Last year, 1,088 wildfires burned through 26,000 square kilometers of land in Alberta, displaced 38,000 people, yet we went into 2024 with no better preparation. While the spring was quiet, July brought back fires in full force, with Jasper being just one of several that endangered Albertans. Our firefighters worked tirelessly, but the resources they needed to effectively manage these fires were systematically cut. At the heart of the issue when it comes to Alberta is the underinvestment in Alberta's wildland firefighters, conservation officers, and the other essential staff. These professionals are underpaid and undervalued, and while firefighters in other jurisdictions receive benefits like presumptive cancer coverage due to the risk they face, Alberta wildland firefighters do not. This discourages experienced personnel from staying in Alberta, leading to a recruitment and retention crisis that has left us all vulnerable. Our most experienced firefighters are leaving for better opportunities, and those who remain are stretched thin. This is not their fault. It is a failure of a system that does not prioritize expertise and safety. The tragedy in Jasper is an example of what happens when the system fails to provide necessary support. Firefighters and support staff on the ground did everything they possibly could, but help came too late. The system did not act quickly enough to prevent the fire from spreading. And despite the heroic efforts of our firefighters, the lack of timely action and inadequate resources allowed the fire to grow out of control. While the Premier had powers at her disposal to intervene, we heard reports that the federal government had requested help from the province, but the response was that Alberta was too busy fighting other fires around the province. This tragedy is not just one of poor funding, but also of damaging rivalry between governments, where jurisdiction disputes have caused the people of Alberta to suffer. When governments fail to collaborate effectively, it's the people on the ground, both the residents and the frontline workers, who bear the brunt of that failure. The death of 24-year-old firefighter Morgan Kitchen in Jasper underscores the risks these professionals face. He was a hero, but his loss should remind us that the government's responsibility to ensure heroes are supported and equipped to do jobs safely. How many more lives will be risked before we ever take action? The issue isn't just about wildfires, it's about the choices we make as a province. Years of cuts to funding and resources left Alberta vulnerable to the growing threat of wildfires that stretch into the town of Jasper. The solution is not only investing in equipment, and more importantly, it's the people who make our wildfire response system work. Our firefighters, our conservation officers, the support staff that have proven their dedication time and again. Now's the time for governments to match that dedication and allow an intercooperative group to be able to work when it comes to fighting fires that are within Jasper and throughout the province of Alberta and Canada. Alberta's future depends on these choices, and if we're serious about protecting our communities and our environment, then we must rebuild and properly fund a system that safeguards all of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galt. We'll go to Ms. Lindsay from the Forest Products Association next.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to be here. Happy to speak to you today on behalf of the Forest Products Association of Canada. FPAC represents Canada's forest sector nationally, with members operating in nearly every province across Canada. Our members are leaders in sustainable forest management and are committed to ensuring that our forests continue to provide environmental, social, and economic benefits to Canadians. The impacts of climate change, including more extreme wildfires, pose a significant threat not only to our forest ecosystem function, but also to the communities that depend on them. The tragedy that unfolded in Jasper is a sobering reminder that our forests and the people who live and work in and around them are at growing risk. I have three main points I want to share with you today. There is a need for proactive action. You've heard this from other panelists. We acknowledge that the federal government has made efforts to address wildfire risk and
Nous savons que le gouvernement fédéral fait des efforts pour adresser la question de la résilience en augmentant les initiatives de ce genre. Par contre, ce financement comprenait plus de ressources pour des programmes tels que FireSmart, des mesures préventives à
the challenge collectively before us. The second point I want to talk about is awareness. And this, again, this is a role where the federal government can play. Understanding vulnerability and wildfire exposure and landscape scale solutions. So change is underway. You heard from Dr. Christian Messier about the Diverse Project. Change is underway in forestry and forestry practices and the role that forests can play in mitigating and increasing the resilience to climate change. The concept and approach I'll refer to as climate smart forestry. It can play both a role in mitigation as well as a role in adaptation and help the resilience of our forest. Climate smart forestry adopts a holistic lens focusing on three key pillars: mitigation potential, unlocking the ability of forests and forest products to reduce emissions through increased carbon uptake and storage, resilience, enhancing forest health and reducing susceptibility to disturbances like fire and pests through adaptive management. Think fuel treatment such as thinning and burning and adapted silviculture, and product substitution, using forest-based products such as forest residues as bioenergy. This helps to displace more carbon-intensive energy sources and materials. And lastly, that there's an urgent need for policy to support and enable these proactive measures. We urge the federal government to elevate fire prevention and forest resilience as a national policy priority and provide the necessary regulatory flexibility and support to implement these initiatives on a larger scale. In undertaking this type of strategy or action plan, it will also identify the lack of a fire lens on existing federal government priorities and policies. This could take the form of a wildfire crisis strategy, or become a dedicated pillar of the national adaptation strategy. We also recognize and support the critical role of Indigenous peoples in returning good fire to the landscape in the form of cultural burning practices and management leadership. And in closing, while the road ahead is challenging, I think we've heard both from Dr. Flanagan and Dr. Messier that for the next 30 to 40 to 50 years, we're into very extreme conditions. But Canada's forest sector can be a key partner in this whole of society approach. And FPAC remains committed to working with all partners to develop solutions that enhance the health and resilience of Canada's forests. Thank you for your attention today, and I look forward to answering any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Lindsay. We'll go now to Deputy Premier Ellis.
Well, thank you, Chair. And
5 minutes, please. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity for Minister Lowen and I to provide Alberta's perspective on the 2024 Jasper wildfire. I want to begin my remarks by first expressing my thanks to all the first responders that were out on the front lines during the incident. They put their own well-being on the line to protect Jasper, help evacuate thousands, and help to rebuild. Their hard work and fearlessness was an inspiration for the whole province, so I do indeed thank you. I'd also like to express my thanks to the Jasper Mayor, Richard Ireland, who displayed tremendous leadership throughout the incident, even despite losing his own home. Thank you, Mayor. This wildfire season in Alberta was challenging for many communities. We continue to be there, of course, to support our residents as needed. The Government of Alberta contributed to strengthening Jasper's emergency management system through annual reviews of their emergency management plans, training for various operational emergency management functions, advice on bylaw and legislative amendments, and of course, functional emergency management exercises to support, and finally, as well as support during the 2024 wildfire. This contributed to successful evacuation of Jasper residents. A combined total of 10,000 Jasperites and upwards of 15,000 tourists were evacuated through British Columbia and Alberta to reception centers in Grand Prairie, Edmonton, and Calgary. I'd also like to extend my thanks to Federal Minister LeBlanc and Public Safety Minister Sajjan of Emergency Preparedness Canada. Your prompt responses to our requests for assistance, and we do indeed thank you. This included, of course, support from Canadian Armed Forces. In addition to collaboration at a federal level, Alberta is currently working with Canadian Red Cross to establish the terms of matching agreement and to provide assistance to those impacted by the Jasper wildfires. However, I would like to take an opportunity to discuss issues with you regarding Unified Command, who had control over the jurisdiction during the Jasper crisis. The fact is that Jasper is surrounded by a national park where the fire originated, presenting a very unique challenge. This challenge was that the park superintendent has oversight for all emergency management decisions for both the park and the municipality. This places the province in a position where we can certainly influence but not decide. Yet the province of Alberta is responsible for most of the bill in regards to the recovery. During the crisis, there was a unified command between the town and Parks Canada, where each was represented by their own incident commander. And that said, the issue that arises is that the superintendent remains responsible unless willing to delegate his authorities, responsibilities, and accountabilities. We also had issues on jurisdictional responses to communicating for those who have been evacuated. With all levels of the government having defined roles, communicating to Jasper was very difficult. Because of this, the government of Alberta took it upon itself to organize and hold town halls to keep evacuees informed. The response to these town halls was greatly appreciated by affected residents who were wanting answers in their time of crisis. As Alberta's Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, there are two items that could assist Alberta with both the Jasper's recovery and with our recovery from future disaster events. Firstly, while the wildfire in Jasper originated within the Jasper National Park, Alberta has approved a disaster recovery program with a budget of about $149 million to support Jasper's recovery. However, under the Federal Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangements, the DFAA, only a portion of Alberta's costs are eligible for reimbursement, and we certainly ask that the DFAA cost share formula be waived, given that this fire originated in the national park, which is federal jurisdiction. This is a fire which originated and in the national park and then spread to the town of Jasper. Therefore, we need to have a discussion on the costs, and that the federal government may be responsible for the costs of this fire. Second, Alberta appreciates the revisions to the DFAA that were announced earlier this year, particularly in the increased focus on mitigation and prevention. We would, however, request that the implementation be delayed from the current date of April 1st, 2025 to the end of September 2025 to ensure that we're not implementing these changes in the midst of a future disaster. And this this short delay will also allow us time to change our policies to match the new guidelines, train up our local authority partners on these new guidelines. In closing, I just want to say thank you to all who are very focused on making sure that we were all working towards a very common goal, which is, of course, the safety and security of Albertans. So we say thank you, and I'll hand it back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Premier. We'll go now to Minister Lowen for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I want to begin by expressing my heartfelt gratitude to all the firefighters and frontline responders who bravely faced the Jasper wildfire. Their courage and dedication has not gone unnoticed, especially during such devastating times. Thank you to the committee members for the opportunity to discuss this event. As we reflect on the tragic events surrounding this disaster, we must acknowledge the profound loss and devastation experienced by the residents of Jasper. Many have lost their homes, cherished belongings, and familiar landscapes they love. I would also like to take a moment to thank Mayor Richard Ireland for his leadership and communication throughout this crisis, especially given his own personal loss during these events. It is a testament to his commitment to the community. We will assist in the cleanup, the restoration of these areas, and together we can strengthen our wildfire management efforts and protect our landscapes for generations to come. In light of the severity of recent wildfires, Alberta's government has implemented a unified command approach with municipalities across the province through Bill 21. We believe this strategy should also extend to federally controlled lands to ensure a coordinated response in the future without delays. We are eager to lend our expertise in battling wildfires. It's clear that proactive forest management plays a critical role in safeguarding both our natural landscapes and the communities that depend on them. Alberta's approach to managing our forests exemplifies how dedicated attention to insect and disease management, carefully planned commercial harvesting, and prescribed burning and community fire guards can make a significant difference in reducing wildfire risk. Alberta's government takes a comprehensive approach to protect our forests. We have invested millions of dollars in mountain pine beetle control. Our mountain pine beetle control program leveraged proactive harvesting of high-risk forests with aggressive survey and control of infested trees. Infested trees pose a major risk because they contribute to wildfire fuel loads. By cutting and burning these problem trees, we've made great strides in reducing the beetle population by 98% since 2019, showing that targeted resource management can make a significant impact. We also proactively reduce wildfire risk by directing companies to focus commercial harvesting on old high-hazard stands and beetle-killed stands and using prescribed burns to effectively reduce the fuel load. This is an important point that I want to emphasize again. Proactive, managed disturbance can and is good for the environment and people. Contrary narratives that frame disturbance as negative are simply oversimplistic and fail to recognize the very valuable aspects of carefully managed disturbance and how that it plays an important part of our landscapes for thousands of years. At a community and homeowner level, we use fire guards, pre-built, cleared strips of land to act as barriers between forested areas and communities. These buffer zones help slow the spread of fires and allow firefighters an anchor point to plan burnout operations, as well as provide safe access points for containment efforts. We also provide funding for communities to plan, prepare, and action fire-smart principles. In contrast, Parks Canada's approach, though well-intentioned, has drawn criticism for being reactive. The tragic events in Jasper highlight the importance of proactive measures in forest conservation and fire prevention. The mountain pine beetle killed trees undoubtedly contributed greatly to the tragic events in Jasper. The vast number of dead trees accelerated the wildfire, making control actions difficult and arguably impossible. No small-scale community fire-smart efforts would help with such an intense fire. The wildfire that ultimately reached Jasper's town site was within Jasper National Park, where Parks Canada has responsibility. Alberta and Parks Canada have a mutual aid agreement, and Alberta stepped in to assist from the very beginning. Alberta's government supported the response by sending firefighters, helicopters, and heavy equipment. In fact, during the wildfire, we had more than 70 firefighters, multiple helicopters, and critical equipment working alongside Parks Canada to fight the flames. Our collaboration included real-time communication and strategic resource sharing, with Alberta Wildfire Resources deployed to support the response from day one. At the time, Alberta was already battling several other large fires across the province. With over 160 active wildfires and over 50 classified as out of control, our priority was protecting communities and infrastructure. Yet when Parks Canada needed help, we made it our top priority, and at no time did we suggest we were too busy, as has been purported. In fact, as we increased our wildfire budget by 55% in this last year, we had even more resources to share this year. This wildfire posed serious risks for the crews on the ground, and sadly, we lost a true hero on August 3rd. Morgan Kitchen lost his life while fighting the fire. He was deeply committed to keeping our communities safe, and he gave everything for a cause he believed in. Without the hard work and dedication of Morgan and all the wildland firefighters, the situation in Jasper could have been much worse. I know I speak for all Albertans when I say we are incredibly grateful for their efforts to protect our beloved mountain town. As we look ahead, it's important to recognize how well Alberta's proactive forest management strategies are working, with more to do. By investing in prescribed burns, fire guards, and harvesting practices, Alberta not only protects its natural heritage, but also helps protect the safety and well-being of its citizens. The wildfire in Jasper reminds us how critical it is to focus on prevention, not just reacting when things go wrong. By pushing for robust forest management policies, we can create a future where our forests thrive and our communities remain resilient in the face of wildfire challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll go to our 6-minute round, and it is Mr. Lloyd who leads off.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister Lowen, will you table the records of Alberta's spending on wildfire management going back the next 10 years for this committee to review?
Yes, absolutely. Again, we increased the budget by 55%. We went from $100.4 million to $155.4 million. And we also increased our contingency amount that was available last year was $1.5 billion, and this year was $2 billion. So another 33% increase there.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Ellis, you alluded to issues with Unified Command. I was told that Alberta was not invited to join the Unified Command until July 27th, I believe. Is that true? And if so, why the delay for Alberta to be included in Unified Command?
Well, that's a good question. I think a question you should probably ask the minister or the national park. We, of course, wanted to be included in the Unified Command from a decision-making perspective right from the very beginning. At this point, we were only in an advisory role, but believe me, these are conversations I had with Minister Sajjan, who did his best to try and get us in a decision-making position.
So the minister didn't seem opposed to being a Unified Command, but somebody within Parks Canada or the town, presumably, who were leading the Unified Command were involved?
So the conversation I had with Minister Sajjan, he did not seem opposed for us being in a position of Unified Command from a decision-making perspective. But he's not the decision maker as far as the minister when it comes to who's on that.
Who is the decision maker?
Well, the minister, I'm assuming, who's responsible for the national park.
That would be Minister Guilbeault. My next question goes to our Forest Products Association witnesses. Back in 2017, the Alberta Forest Products Association, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Jasper, Jim Maglinski, numerous forest scientists, including Ken Hodges, wrote numerous letters to the Minister of Environment, Catherine McKenna, at the time in this Liberal government, talking about the catastrophic threat to Jasper of a wildfire. And the responses at the time that were given to them in question period and in letters was that the ecological integrity of the park must be protected. Your organization has to abide by regulations involving sustainability and all these matters. In your opinion, does it maintain the ecological integrity of a national park to maintain large swaths of dead pine beetle infested forest?
Thanks for the question. So, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of Parks Canada because there are laws around what type of management can take place. But I can say that it was known that, and I think what Minister Lowen had said, that the forest product sector and the province of Alberta were starting to implement the Healthy Pine Strategy. So actually targeting pine stands to reduce the risk of flammability. And that same level of intervention was not taking place within the park.
It's a simple question. Is it promoting ecological integrity to let stands of dead, mature pine beetle infested trees to stand in a national park? Is that promoting ecological integrity?
Well, I think it comes down to what level of risk are we comfortable based on where we live today, and that risk is increasing. So I think in the past, having static reserves was meant to act as essentially something that could be monitored in time, almost like a test case.
Would you say that like young forests, though, when a forest company replants a forest, puts in new trees, they're more resilient to forest fires? Is that the case?
Yeah, essentially, you want to manage the level of fuels.
Thank you.
So reducing the fuels and replanting a forest will be more resilient. Yeah.
It's been noted to me, you alluded to federal policies that are impacting wildfire risk, not just in national parks, but outside of national parks. And you alluded that you don't think there's a fire lens being included. Is the Species at Risk Act one of those policies? Is that contributing to wildfire risks in Canada?
There is growing concern, and I've actually had the opportunity to fly over parts of Alberta because I have been working on caribou recovery across Canada, and there's growing concern that these older stands that have been set aside for caribou pose increased risk of burning, which will actually not be helpful for caribou recovery and not be helpful for communities that live in and around those areas. So a fire lens is something that we are recommending. Yeah.
Back in 2017, the Alberta Forest Products Association, in a letter in the Edmonton Journal, said that they believed it would be about $85 million to combat the mountain pine beetle, which they specifically cited that the pine beetle was allowed to run rampant in Jasper National Park. What do you think the cost would be to the federal government to manage the forests in Canada's national parks?
What would it cost them?
Maybe you can send that to me in writing because I've only got about 30 seconds left. One of my Liberal colleagues said the other day that they didn't think it was really feasible to do active forest management techniques in national parks, and that it wouldn't really do much to prevent fires. Do you agree with that assessment?
I mean, there's actually a video that's been made showcasing how CAN4 was brought in to do some thinning, and I think it was effective in saving parts of Jasper. And so if that could have been deployed in a larger area, that could have been effective in mitigating. And so it is possible. I think it will take some cross learning between park staff and commercial forestry. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Van Koerden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister Ellis, thanks for joining us today at the committee. Our colleague, the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, Minister Sajjan, was here last week, as you're probably aware, and Minister Sajjan ensured this committee that coordination between his office and your office, his officials and yours, was consistent and steady throughout this horrible event this past summer. It's kind of gross to talk about jurisdiction when we're talking about people's lives and livelihoods, but that's kind of where we are, I suppose. But it's my understanding that with respect to the Unified Command, Alberta was at the table immediately from the officials' perspective, and that Alberta was the first call from Minister Sajjan's office. Was that your understanding this summer?
Yes, again, from an advisory perspective, yes. And let me just say, Minister Sajjan and I worked very well together, and I would say that it was that working relationship that I think worked very well for the people of Jasper and the critical incident that we were facing at that particular time. My comments are really only in reference to the command and the decision-making ability, and that's where we were only there in advisory capacity. We were not there on a decision-making capacity.
I understand. Thank you, Minister Ellison. Last week, I asked that the Parks Canada staff here relay this committee's collective sympathy and gratitude for all of the work that they did. Indeed, the work that was a collaboration between all of these various groups saved lives. So I don't think I have to ask for unanimous consent in this committee, but I'd hope that you could express the same to your colleagues and staff. And what happened this summer was a tragedy, but the preparatory work undertaken by Parks Canada, by your colleagues, and by the ministers as well, saved lives. So collectively, we'd like to thank you for that. Over to you, Mr. Galt. We've heard, honestly, some conflicting reports regarding how well various levels of government and jurisdictions collaborated. We've also heard conflicting reports with respect to funding for wildfires in the province of Alberta. Could you highlight for us, from an employment of firefighters and teams of first responders perspective, what we could all be doing better to ensure a more well-resourced personnel when it comes to both avoiding these disasters and responding to them?
Sure, thank you for the question. What it boils down to in the province of Alberta is we have wildland firefighters who are seasonal, and a lot of them are students. So if you look back over the news, you'll see that Minister Ellis would say that we would be ready by March, we'll be ready by April, and we still were not ready by May. So what happens is and I'll point out our wildfire staff, they make $22 an hour with no benefits, no pre-cancer coverage. And other provinces are offering it. Similar to Ontario, it's offering $10,000 sign-in bonus. So if we just look at this year alone, people that we didn't get who would have chose to go to Ontario got a $10,000 bonus to go become a wildfire fire in Ontario. And then we brought back 174 people from Ontario to help fight the fires in Jasper and across the province. So the government can say that they are putting $151 million, which they did, but that's over 3 years, and that goes into tankers, which we can't use, and it goes into helicopters we can't use when we're flying smoke. It is not going into the resources on the ground, and that is what is needed. So they're undervalued, underpaid, and they're just not coming back. And even in, I believe, 2021, the government cut 247 positions, 57 in wildfire management, which means in 2023, we started out in a serious year with no staff at all.
Great. Well, that's very clear. Thank you very much. And it's my hope that this government's Bill 224 will help unify the inclusion of various cancers linked to firefighting right across the province, because I know that unfortunately there are provinces that treat various cancers differently, and we know that when these heroes are exposed to these toxic chemicals, that's an employment-related illness, so it should be treated as such. Thank you for your work. This has been a tough couple of meetings for anybody that has ever spent time battling a fire. I've talked to a couple of my friends who, after leaving sport, went into to firefighting, and this summer was really, really devastating for Albertans. I've got family in Jasper, and it was a very emotional time. So if you could also relay our collective gratitude and sympathy to the folks that you represent, I'd really appreciate that. And from the perspective of how we value and how we see biodiversity in Canada has also been highlighted by various academics and witnesses on this committee. And with wildfires and natural disasters increasing, I think we've got to step up as a committee, but also as a government. And when we lose nature, we jeopardize a lot of things that we rely on and take for granted. That includes clean air, clean water, flood regulation, climate regulation. In Halton, we rely on our conservation authority. So, I know that would relate. But Mr. Chair, if I could put on notice the following motion, that this committee undertake a pre-study on Bill C-73, an act respecting transparency and accountability in relation to certain commitments that Canada has made under the Convention of Biological Diversity. To this end, the committee will hold a minimum of 8 meetings, invite the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change and their officials, that the last 2 meetings be dedicated to clause-by-clause consideration, and it's been emailed. No, I'm just making a notice of motion.
Okay.
That the study will begin within 10 days, adoption of this motion.
If it's been circulated, we can stop there.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's just notice. Okay, we'll go to Madame Posey.
Voilà.
Here we are. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. Listen, a lot of numbers have been floated concerning what the costs could be. I think that gives us a good idea that it's costly, climate change is. We don't talk about it often enough for me. My question would be for Ms. Daniels. Perhaps you're the best person to answer it. I'll give you an example. In Quebec last year, in 2023, there were 566 fires in what they call the intensive protection areas and 147 others in what they call the northern area. 4 million, over 4 million hectares of land area were burned, 99.9% of it caused by lightning. So it's more than the sum of the past 20 years, including all causes. And if we turn to the SOPFE site, it says that the capacity of SOPFE, which is the organization in Quebec responsible for fighting forest fires, would enable them to fight 30 fires at the same time, or one fire of more than 1,000 hectares. But on June 4, 2023, 155 fires were active at the same time. So when we see these kinds of numbers, we see that the scale of what awaits us. Ms. Daniels, according to you, what can a government or what must a government do to aid in planning the allocation of emergency resources when a number of catastrophic events occur at the same time, which is exactly what happened in Quebec? It's already well to have people fight fires, but there were far too many of these fires. So do you have any advice to give regarding what a government could do?
Thank you, Madam Posey. What a conundrum that you've outlined for both Quebec and exists across our country, where we're seeing multiple fires ignite simultaneously, creating emergencies.
Je m'excuse, Madame Dadia, je suis obligée de vous interrompre parce que je n'ai pas la traduction.
There's no
Alors,
translation.
est-ce que c'est is it back on the translation, Madame Posey? Can you hear the translation? Oui, c'est bon?
C'est bon.
C'est bon. OK, on y va.
Okay. This problem is not limited to Quebec, but we are finding it in provinces across the country. Multiple fires at the same time causing a crisis. We know that wildfires and extreme wildfires are overwhelming our suppression capability and exceeding all modern technology. This is a global problem, which is why we are also advocating for proactive and transformative forest management to ensure that our landscapes and communities will be resilient to future fires. So those fuels mitigation, prescribed and cultural burns, concentrated around communities, but also expanding onto the landscape. The forest industry and forest management has the greatest impact on our landscapes across Canada. It is critical that our forest management is transformed in a way that ensures that we have resilient ecosystems into the future, which involves diversifying our silviculture practices, our harvesting practices, the trees that we replant, and also modifying the way that we allow fire to interact with those forests.
Je vous remercie, Madame Daniels. Je vous poserai une question à Monsieur Lowen.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. And a question from Mr. Lowen. You're at the government of Alberta. As you know, Bill C-76, which is currently on the table to amend the National Parks Act of Canada to eliminate obstacles to rebuilding Jasper by allowing streamlining of the decision-making process by local officials or elected officials. In your opinion, is Bill C-76 sufficient in order to facilitate the rebuilding of Jasper following the forest fires?
I think it'll be interesting to see how it works out when it's actually implemented, Bill 76. I think Bill 76 is a good start. We would like to see less barriers when it comes to and having more autonomy within Alberta and within Jasper town itself. We have a municipality there that's capable of making decisions. We have a provincial government that has a Municipal Government Governance Act that I believe is capable of taking care of things there too. So I would love to see less restrictions from the federal government and Parks Canada when it comes to rebuilding Jasper.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. I would like to ask a question of Mr. Galt as spokesperson for employees or unionized employees. Do your members often talk to you about the problems that they see connected with climate change and the scale of what they see in connection with climate change?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, our members do talk quite frequently about climate change, the act of the fires, and how they have been growing at a greater deal every year. The fires are getting harder to fight. They are getting hotter to fight. And in some of the areas, we've never had fires before, but with climate change happening now, these are new areas considered to where the pine beetle infestation was now. Everybody knew that a fire would start there at some point, but I don't think anybody took into consideration that climate change would increase that. And we are now facing the reality that for those who don't even want to agree with climate change, that the fires are getting hotter and harder to fight, and our members are facing that as they are stretched thin with resources.
Thank you. Merci, Madame Posé.
Thank you, Ms. Posé. Ms. Collins, it'll be your turn, and we'll wind up with you because that'll make 2 hours, and we don't have resources to continue much longer. So please go ahead.
Chair, I want to thank all the witnesses for being
sorry,
here.
just a second, I have a point of order.
Do we have not resources till 1:30?
Yeah, but we're already at 1:15.
Yeah, so we got some more rounds. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah,
Very
that's why we're going to have like 30 seconds, it doesn't make any sense to
We'll do another round.
Well, we only have resources till 1:30.
Okay, so we're going to 1:30 though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if we have 5 minutes left, we can't have, we can talk about.
We'll keep on going though. Okay, very good.
No, I didn't say we'd keep on going. I'm saying we can't start another round if we only
Maybe
have
we
5
could
minutes.
discuss this after my round.
Well, we're not eating into your time, but I've been asked the question by Mr. Mazier, and it's really tight. There's no way we can have another round of questions.
So after Ms. Collins,
which will take us to almost 1:25.
Oh, it's only quarter after.
Well, she has 6 minutes. It's okay, 1:20, 1:20, 1:21. Let's see how it goes. Okay.
We can go do another round. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Mr. Galt. And I want to echo the thanks to your members. Their heroic action is constantly keeping communities safe. We've heard a lot about the courage of your members. We've heard politicians thank them, but oftentimes those thanks ring hollow if there isn't the support, the resources that they need. So can you talk a little bit about before the Jasper fire and really leading up into this wildfire season, what were you hearing from firefighters? What concerns were being raised?
Thank you very much for the question. We have this conversation every year that they are understaffed, underappreciated, lack of respect from the government. They are constantly receiving cuts. Like I said, a couple of years ago, they received a few cuts that follows in. It is very hard to do a job in any province when you are stretched thin but asking for more and more. It becomes frustrating. Our members have no benefits. So if they're sick, their choice is to not go to work. But if they're on a camp, they are staying at the camp because they need the unemployment. Fire season is it's lasting longer, but our season isn't lasting longer. We are now down to, and I'm sure Minister Lowen, if he wants to, we're down to maybe 50 or 60 because we have contract firefighters now. Last year we had 64 carryover fires, which is well over the amount that we normally have. And so what's happening is it is a feeling of, why am I doing this? They're doing it because they love the job. They're doing it because they love Albertans, and they're doing it because it's something that they want to do. But you can only ask people to be paid $22 an hour to go in and risk their life. And the loss of Morgan Kitchen is a drastic loss that will be felt through Alberta wildland. And it's something that is going to take a while to get over. And for us, what the complaints are is the finger pointing. We are just going in to fight fires. We have to remember that on the 24th, we were removed from Jasper. We do not fight structure fires. The smoke was too bad. We don't have respiratory gear, so they were moved to Hinton for the safety. But they want to be in there fighting. We have members who are on municipal firefighters so that they can continue to fight. But at the end of the day, they're frustrated and tired.
Yeah, it feels like we've heard from the province that there were delays at being invited into unified command in a decision-making capacity. We've heard complaints that the provincial government didn't have capacity or so on. But really, the kind of failure to collaborate effectively, people don't care necessarily if it's provincial or federal jurisdiction. They want their communities to be safe, and firefighters want to make sure that they are safe as they can be while they're fighting these fires.
Well, what I'll say, the issue that is going on is Jasper is a municipality inside federal land, but it's a municipality as of 2001. The province has a responsibility to those members. And if they're not choosing to use it, there are reasons or legislation that she can use. There are new legislation powers that she gave. And this isn't just a slight on this government, it is any government. They have the ability to step in earlier. They chose not to. They put our firefighters at risk. And they say, yes, we are so thankful for you. But then they say in the paper that you're not worth a raise, you're not worth anything else. And that's the battle that we have in the province as we move towards privatization.
Yeah, and $22 an hour for a wildland firefighter and no health benefits. That's, appalling when you think about the fact that these men and women are risking their lives to keep communities safe. But it's also a practical challenge when it comes to retention. Can you talk a little bit about the impacts that you've seen when it comes to recruitment and retention?
So when it comes to recruitment and retention, the issue that we're having is if we work on a scale in the province, so every year that you are working, you go up a scale. When it comes to firefighting, you're only a 4 or 5 month season, so it takes you 3 years to move up. So you come into Alberta, you get the experience, and you move on to another area. That's what's happening. And we're losing the depth of knowledge that we need to fight these fires. It's not... We have people with 2-3 years experience. They are doing the best they can. They are working hard and they are saving people's lives and property. But what it boils down to when you look at it is every year we are in the same thing. Last year, Minister Lowen was supposed to have them hired by March. It was still well into May, and you have brand new people going into fires. And it's not just a Jasper fire. Remember, we had 55 out of control fires across this province and evacuations in Fort McMurray and different areas.
Now, we know that firefighters are dying at higher rates of cancer than they are of fighting fires. That is pretty appalling when you think about the fact that these firefighters that you're talking about don't have cancer coverage. Can you talk about the importance of that in particular?
When you see other provinces like BC and Ontario that are starting to give pre-cancer coverage, and then you hear on the news that the smoke is so bad at Fort McMurray, people need to be inside because the smoke can cause cancer. And then you hear that the people who are actually inside fighting the fires don't have that coverage. It really makes them feel like they are not appreciated. There was a minister, I'm not sure if it was a minister, it was somebody from the government that was on that was talking about our wildland firefighters understand the act of fighting fire, and if they are supposed to be behind the smoke plume, but he said if they are in front of the smoke plume, then they're in the wrong spot. Well, that is not on the firefighter, that is on wind and different things that are happening. And the government continues just to say that the firefighter, it's up to you to be responsible, but no gear, no nothing. And why stay? Unfortunately, they stay because they love Albertans, and a lot of them, that's memories that they have to protect.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Collins. So we have no time really. Our resources are up at 1:30. We have no time for another round that would equitably treat 6 questioners. So I'm going to thank the witnesses both online and present, and I'm going to adjourn. Thank you.
you.